Greetings, upstanders. Dr. O here, and now people want to have, well, I'm not going to say now, but now it's in the news, this debate over how tragic or how important it is to study slavery or not study slavery. This comes off of Jillian Michaels' comments on Abby Phillip's show last week, talking about so much of the African American Museum is devoted to slavery and everything is white people bad, and only 2% of white people owned enslaved people. And then, of course, Trump is parroting this now, talking about this in phone calls, like how bad was slavery and so on and so forth. Number one, of course, I think this is Trump throwing another story into the news to distract from the Epstein files. But since we're here, let's have that conversation. One of the things that I appreciated that Abby Phillip did on her show last night was that she started the segment with a fact check about the history of American slavery and how bad it was, even playing the voice of a formerly enslaved individual. Why is that important? The fact of the matter is, when we have these important debates, if we start at different points of departure, we're going to end at different destinations. And so many people come onto these shows and these panels, and they're starting from different points of departure. And many people aren't really coming to have a conversation. They're coming to speak to their own following, to raise money. These people aren't going into these sessions looking for information. They're going into them looking for affirmation. And so to level set that, Abby Phillip made it clear that this is where we are going with this. And this is where we need to do what we need to be doing as a country, because this country has a history of denying what little history we've already gotten about the black experience in this country, and they want to remove that. And one of the things, I was just on the Clay Kane show, we were talking about is, he reminds us that this is not new. There have always been attempts to deny the full teaching of black history, whether we're talking about the building of Confederate statues, which happened way long after the Civil War was done, 30, 40 years after. Daughters of the American Revolution that were writing school curricula. Oh, Daughters of the American Revolution have become the moms of liberty of today. So this is not new. You also have fake so-called universities like PragerU, a non-accredited institution that is partnering with the Department of Education to rewrite curricula and provide educational cartoons for kids as they celebrate America's 250-year anniversary next year. And if you ever go on PragerU and look at some of their videos, they disrespect the legacy of people like Frederick Douglass and downplay the black experience in this country. And so from K to college, they are actively working to deny history and the experiences of black people. And one of the things that Scott Jennings said on the show was that, slavery was bad, but it's something we overcame. We didn't overcome it. Look at all of they look at some of the health disparities in the black community. They date back to slavery, and followed by Jim Crow and other things that we've talked about throughout history. Where we live, the educational system, the ability to be able to work in particular industries. Like, you could run down the list when the New Deal was passed, and it primarily denied black people who are domestics and farm workers from being part of it, because those were positions that we held primarily during slavery. And then, as Bakari Sellers talked about in the segment, you can go to the corporate side and the corporations that benefited from slavery. Talking about the universities, I can mention universities like my alma mater, Georgetown, that had to sell its enslaved individuals in order to keep itself open. So on both sides, they get you coming and going in terms of the disparities we're still facing in poor communities, and the profits that companies and universities are still reaping. And of course, though there wasn't slavery in the North, we know that people were coming up to these fine universities with their enslaved individuals as well. So to sit here and downplay this, look, we lived in a country where, at a moment, for a while, if you were like a Holocaust denier, for example, you were somebody who was put on the fringes, put on the margins. Now you could be a Holocaust denier and have a huge platform and a big career and be very successful. If that's something that can be platformed and people can make money off of, including some of the people who are in the White House in the Trump administration now, they think it's going to be a cakewalk to deny the brutality of slavery, and we can't let that happen. And they've always tried to do that. They called it at one point a peculiar institution. I mean, this is what the history books wrote. And a few years ago, there was, and I talk about this in my book, Lies About Black People. Some of the Texas books that came out talked about people who were enslaved as migrant workers. Like, this is what books have been written that have come out in the last 5 years have been talking about. So if we're going to be honest with ourselves, this is not what Trump is talking about, what Michaels is talking about. This is not new. We just have a president now who's parroting this at a large level and encouraging other people to do so. And we can't let it happen. And lastly, part of the reason this is happening is because they don't want white kids, black kids, indigenous kids, Latino kids, Jewish kids, Muslim kids coming together in solidarity. I remember during the Black Lives Matter movement, when it was in real big form, there was this black boy that was going to be arrested by the cops, a middle school student, I don't know, maybe a high school student, and a white girl got in front of him to block him from the cops. This is the solidarity that these folks don't want. That's why they got the anti-woke legislation, anti-CRT legislation, removing all of this stuff from schools, things that I'm going to be talking about in my next book, Trigger Words. But the Black Lives Matter movement was the first movement in American history for civil rights where the majority of people in this country at one point were on the side of it. We're on the side of it. When you look at the civil rights movement of the 60s and the momentous and impactful work that it made, majority of Americans were against it. Dr. King was unpopular at the time of his assassination, but they fought and persevered. So that's what I mean. They don't want that. They don't want us coming together. One of the things I say in my book is that I have a poem called Critical Racist Theory, and I say that I know that white kids age 16 to 19 can handle 16, 19, even white kids in elementary and preteens, because too many kids get angry when they find out the truth about America's complete history that wasn't taught in their youth. America can only become as good as its promise when we are honest about our future, you all. And so we have to teach the truth every single day. That poem I wrote was designed to celebrate teachers who don't quit, to celebrate teachers who want to teach the truth in our school, because that's when we can handle it when we teach American history in full. And as a college professor, I'm seeing the consequences of students who are coming into schools not knowing full history. But this is what people want. And we have to continue to fight this. And so I appreciate what Abby Phillip did in leveling the conversation. It needs to continue because there can be no point of departure where everyone starts that slavery wasn't that bad or slavery doesn't need to be studied. And I know I said lastly like 80 minutes ago, but it's also important to be mindful for anyone who's not been to the African American Museum is that the African American History Museum is not a slavery museum. There are museums about slavery specifically, but there's so much more of our culture that is in there. Don't regulate us just to the slave experience. So when there's so much there about Black entrepreneurship, about legal decisions, hell, Clarence Thomas is in the museum. Did you know that? There's sort of celebrations of music, of activism, of medicine, whole section on hip hop, Black music experience, television, and the like. Barry Gordy's car, Motown. There's so much more in there than just slavery. So please don't relegate it to that, even though some people don't even know that the museum was actually built on a plantation, a former plantation. So let's not try to celebrate history by forgetting history. Let's tell history in its full and make sure that we don't allow anybody to talk about slavery. That's something that shouldn't be taught in school. So we were never getting enough of it as it is. And now we have to make sure that we are level setting this. And I'm hoping to work with anybody that wants to do just that. Let me know what you think. Peace.